Free advice, would you like some free advice? Free advice forever.
Welcome back, everybody. It's episode 16 coming at you just a little bit late on Wednesday.
You want to tell them why?
Well, we had some technical problems.
You want to tell them why?
Well, okay, somebody.
Be vulnerable. Let's
One
model
of the
vulnerability.
members of our podcasting collective, I'm not going to give you a number to tell you how many of us there are, but one of the members with the responsibility of bringing the laptop charger forgot the laptop charger last time, and the computer may have died midway through the recording and deleted the recording up to that point. And we may have spent so much time chatting before the recording that we did not have time to record another episode.
These are all possibilities. And I just want to say that this is a great opportunity for us to model this, I think, is like,
what are we modeling?
One could say that this was a mistake. You know, it was. I mean, it was. You didn't purposefully do this.
All right, theoretically, someone's saying this is a mistake.
Theoretically, all theory.
Then what?
And I just want our listeners to know that it has not changed my opinion of Rob. He is still 100% worthy, 100% someone I love, my best friend, my co-creator. I still trust him with the responsibilities of what it takes to make this podcast. Everybody make mistakes. Everybody make mistakes. And everybody fine. So I love you. And I don't give two fucks. And if people are upset that we're out a few hours late, then, I encourage them to look at where could they have more compassion for mistakes in their own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I love you.
Yeah, thank you. I love you too. Generally, I'd like to keep them coming at the same time, same point of the week. But I'm not.
We get that.
I'm not beating myself up about this. This is fine.
It's all fine.
Yeah. I remember death. I remember how we're all this is going to disappear in the blink of a giant's eye.
Yeah.
And so what?
But I bet that when the eye is that big, it actually takes longer for the lid to go all the way down. Because it's if you imagine.
From our perspective.
If you imagine that the eye is like the size of a planet, for the lid to close over that, wouldn't you think it would take a little more time than, like, let's say, a newt blinking?
Sure. I think so.
Great. Thanks for delving into that with
me. Yeah, all mammals take about the same amount of time to pee, which is very interesting. That a mouse...
Is it? No, it is.
It is.
I'm just kidding.
Well, because think about the difference between a mouse and an elephant.
And, like, the musculature.
That they both empty their bladders in around 30 seconds. That's, like, standard across mammals. Means that the amount of output from an elephant is much wider than that of a mouse.
So yes, I would imagine that. So the bladder is more full. There's more liquid in there, but the release comes from a wider spout.
Yes,
and maybe there's musculature that pushes it out faster.
Yes,
or proportionate to its size and
I would say all
other
of that.
structure anatomically. Yeah,
I've peed for 1 minute and 6 seconds.
I was going to ask what your longest run time was.
I've peed for 1 minute and 6 seconds.
6 seconds. Yeah.
Pretty long.
Yeah.
I wasn't holding back during that time. I was just...
Oh, yeah.
I mean...
Let it go. Yeah. Let it go.
So...
Yeah. I think mine is over a minute, too.
Did you time
I
it?
usually get to a point... I didn't time it exactly.
You gotta time it.
All right, well, next time I will.
I feel like girls pee a lot faster.
Faster?
Mm-hmm. I was listening to an ex of mine pee... And it was like a water balloon popped, and then just all of it just like dumping out a bucket, and it was done. And I was like, "Holy crap! How do you do that?"
I've had an ex make fun of me for the way that my pee sounds.
What's it sound like? Like a water balloon just popped and fell in the toilet?
No, it was.
That's a great analogy.
I believe the word squeegee was used, and I was like, "Huh, not overly flattering, but thank you for your feedback."
How would your ideal man ideally describe the sound of your peeing? If you were putting it in a love poem or something.
Oh, yes. Like the trickling out of wasted truths.
Wasted truths?
I have no fucking clue. I have no clue. That's just a first draft.
Okay.
Something that implies that I'm this flowing being that is majestic in some way, has lots of wisdom, lots of, it's the outpouring of the remnants of what it takes to run this
Which
well-oiled
is truth.
machine.
You run on truth, and
I
these
run
are
on
truths
truth.
that are wasted.
I eat truth cereal.
Yeah. What if you called it lost sweat?
Sure, but that's. I mean, I don't.
Isn't
What if?
Is
Yeah,
it not
sure.
Because if you had sweat it wouldn't have come out
Right. Exactly.
there.
Yeah, I get it, but
Maybe some of it. It would have come out browner.
that's disgusting. What color was the pee you just peed?
Yellow.
Oh.
And more importantly, it was asparagusy.
Oh.
We just had us some asparagus.
I'm one of those people that has a gene where you can't smell it, or doesn't have the gene where you can smell it, or whatever. It
Right,
is.
but do you make it? Have you had anyone else test it?
I have no idea.
Oh, you got to have me test it.
Okay, next time you can smell my pee.
Great.
We'll make a date, and you can time it and smell it
Just do
for
it before
me.
you go. Just pee before you go. I'm sure you're going to have to.
Oh, you mean here when I get done?
Yeah.
Sure,
After
sure,
this
sure, sure.
podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
You want to stop the podcast right now and do this? I'm sure everybody's on the edge of their seats listening.
You know what I kind of do want to stop the podcast to do is
You
drink
are.
more water because I'm kind of thirsty, and then that will ensure
No,
that I have
this
to
is-
pee. Just
you
hand it to me.
shouldn't-
Oh, because
shouldn't
you're
drink
sick.
mine. I have a slight tickle in my throat.
All right. Well, I guess I'll just. Oh, my water bottle's over there. I can see it. Should I get up and go get it? Okay.
Sure, go for it.
Be right back.
But make sure you're wearing headphones and they come off.
Oh, I'm aware.
I'll kill the dead air while she's gone. Well, she's just about back, so I guess I didn't really have to come up with anything too compelling.
counts.
But thank God I could never run this podcast by myself. That
Aw.
that
that's
20
sweet.
seconds was
Murder.
the loneliest of my life.
Wow.
How would I ever put on something all alone?
Oh my God.
I don't know. Okay, well you're back.
Well, you did just do a one-man hour-long show.
I know I was setting you up for that.
Oh, okay. So Rob has a one-man hour-long rap comedy musical.
Yeah, it's called One Hump Heart. It's a solo comedy rap musical in
And
which
it's
I date
amazing.
myself from the future.
From the future.
There's 10 original songs. It's pretty entertaining.
So as someone who's seen it 3 times, it's incredible.
Wow.
And I cannot wait for the soundtrack to come out because
Yeah.
the songs are so catchy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very in the spirit of this podcast. So
Good. Maybe we could cross promote a little bit.
totally.
Use the make our podcast picture the album art for the thing. Just confuse people. Just make the
I don't think that's
soundtrack.
cross promoting. That's just like being confusing. It's just flippity floppiting.
Okay. We can think about the audience share.
And then we can make it my EP cover randomly.
Yeah.
Swap it out.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
All right. You want to get to the questions?
Do you have any advice that you want guidance on from me this week?
Okay, yeah. I'm going to go visit Pacifica University tomorrow at their open house just to check it out. I'm not sold on going to grad school. I just heard about it because I was looking for a therapist a while back, and one of the guys was a hypnotherapist who studied there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, interesting. They have some like alternative psychology and therapy programs here, and it's
Yeah,
like an hour and a half
cool.
away.
Oh, really? It's that far away?
It's in Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a beautiful area. Would be something that I could potentially commute or live near LA still, like not give up my whole community here.
Yeah. What's the program called? Do you know what the name of it is?
They have like a bunch of different programs. I don't know
Okay.
which I'm specifically looking at.
Okay.
What should I do to prepare, or in the moment, what should I look at? How should I evaluate it? What are some things that I might not know are important that you find out only from being in grad school? It's also just a grad school. It's not there's no undergrad program there.
So I went to grad school at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and they do have undergrad, but my program was very small. It was in art therapy, and it was very disconnected from both the undergraduate program and the other grad programs because they weren't fine arts, which most of the other programs were. And I feel like your experience hopefully would be a little more integrated. You should see how integrated the different therapeutic programs are and how much are you plugged into like the network and the alumni and stuff, because those things can be really helpful once you graduate. In considering grad school in general, I would think about, what are you hoping to get out of it? What are the things that you don't think that you could train yourself in? Because it is a huge commitment, time, energy, all of financial, obviously. And, it is a big disruption to your regular life.
Sure.
I was while I was in grad school, it was a 2-year program, and I was like drowning and only doing that one thing. And specifically learning how to be a therapist, a lot of that work, although it's work that you've already done, is
Thank you.
self-investigation
Sure.
and dealing with a lot of your patterns. That all being said, I've been in and out of therapy had been for, almost a decade when I started grad school, and it still was all consuming and very energetically and emotionally taxing. Because you add homework on top of that, you add going to class, you add peer connections, you add internship. I don't know if you have that.
Sure.
Practicum, whatever it is. And it's just a lot. And it will take a lot away from the things that you consider important in your life right now.
Okay.
All that being said, it was the most valuable thing I've ever done for myself. I even said, even if I never am an art therapist, which basically I'm not, this will still be the most valuable educational training I've ever received. And I believe that through and through. And so I think that, knowing some of those more practical considerations, go in there and feel it with your heart, feel it with your gut, and see if you can see yourself there, and see if the people that are there and the people that have gone down the path that you're considering, where have they ended up? What is their advice for you? Just like you asked me. The other thing that I wasn't prepared for, which probably would apply to you, is look into credentialing and licensure and where can you practice, what additional things are required to actually start working as these types of professionals. Because I think that was a lot in the clouds for me.
Is that school dependent or state dependent?
For probably state dependent. I mean, I think if you're going to a school in California, you'll be all good to go about practicing in California. But I went to school in New York, and so it was a whole big fucking mess.
I don't intend to leave California.
Cool.
Anytime soon.
Yeah, but still look into what is the experience of being your first year out of grad school, because a lot of us felt a little bit like, whoa, we really weren't given as much information as we could have been or should have been to prepare for that experience.
Yeah.
Because it is really hard, and a lot of people burn out. And, depending on what kind of experiences you still need to have in order to finish out your clinical experience for licensure or whatever it is, you could be working jobs that are very difficult and then still need to kind of recover after going to grad school.
Sure.
So those are all the things I would tell you, having been.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. You ready to move on to
Oh, yeah.
the question?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Except, should we wait for all of our listeners who are taking diligent notes on going to grad school to be therapists in California?
No. They're fine. All right.
Guys, put your pencils down. We're about to go into the question.
But good work using pencil. All right. Today's question comes from Reddit user 19throwaway79.
Okay.
I just broke up with my boyfriend of 2+ years a week ago. Is it too soon to casually swipe on Tinder? It was a good breakup and a long time coming, so I had months to adjust to the idea, but I'm definitely not 100% over it.
Sure.
I'm not looking to get into any relationship anytime soon.
Oh, yeah.
But I just thought that meeting new people might help with my moving on rather than just wallowing in my sadness. Is it disrespectful at this time frame? Haven't had a real breakup in a really long time, so I don't know the protocol.
I love this question so much.
Great.
Having been through many breakups and cycles of going back onto online dating and then getting into new relationships, I feel extremely equipped to address it, and I'm excited to.
Good.
Should I just jump right in, or do you have any thoughts?
I have plenty of thoughts, but go ahead.
You want me to go? Okay.
Yeah.
So I went through a breakup 2 months ago, almost exactly. And let's see, what did I do in this iteration? I waited a little bit, but
did you feel like getting on Tinder?
What's up?
Did you feel like getting on Tinder? When did you feel like getting on Tinder?
Probably about a week or two after breaking up, because I think there's definitely that period of just absolute immediate crisis healing and wound that needs to get resolved a little bit, where you're just like insularly sad. And, you know, like you said, throwaway, that you've had time to sort of be mentally and emotionally pulling out of the relationship and disconnecting from this person. And so your grieving process, your healing process probably started quite a bit before the actual relationship ended. So I overall don't think that you need to have any guilt about. There is no right answer about this, I would say. Everyone is different. Everyone's healing process and grieving process looks completely different. I don't think you need to worry about disrespecting your ex-partner. I don't think you need to worry about, you know, as long as you take certain precautions, which I'll describe, I don't think you need to worry about disrespecting prospective dates. I think my biggest concern or caveat that I would ask you to tread carefully on is being respectful of yourself and the process that needs to happen to mourn that relationship, and make sure you're not totally immersing yourself in dating other people without really being conscious of thinking about what you have lost from the old relationship. Does that make sense?
Can I jump on that?
Please.
19 throwaway 79 says here that they thought meeting new people might help with moving on rather than just wallowing in the sadness. I do agree with that. I also think that re-meeting the people who are also in your life already as a single person doesn't mean that you have to date them, but just that perhaps you have more emotional energy, or there are needs that were met by your partner that you could, like, say you used to vent about your boss to your boyfriend. Maybe one of your friends would be really receptive to hearing about that, or is going through a similar situation, might even be better than your boyfriend, but you just had fallen into a routine of having that conversation with your boyfriend all the time. So re-examine the people you already have relationships with. I do think that it's good to be meeting new people rather than isolating, if you feel up to it. You seem to feel up to it. Just be wary of trying to shove someone into the slot that you had created for this ex-boyfriend. Of like, if you're dating again, it may be easy to fall into the routine of quickly treating that person exactly like your ex because that's comfortable. And I think that is doing a disservice to this new person that you meet and creating a new role for that person, given their strengths and weaknesses and compatibilities and incompatibilities with you.
Yeah. I actually have sort of parallel or maybe perpendicular advice as well.
Hit
Which
it from a
is,
90-degree angle.
Yes. Neither acute nor obtuse. Yeah. So the other thing that I often do, and I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing, but it's just something to be mindful of similarly, is, you know, not necessarily going too far on the other side of the spectrum. Because often I end up dating people that are directly a reaction to like what I saw as kind of like a primary flaw of my ex-partner, where I'm like, oh, they were really shy, so now I go for someone who's super outgoing,
Like
which
what
is
Joe
fine.
Rogan said America did after Barack Obama.
The complete opposite. Yeah. So it's okay to do that. You know, and it's okay to be attracted to and want to fill that void that probably was there pre-dating that person that you're now more aware of, where you're like, oh, like maybe this person was too, used humor as a defense mechanism. And then you go for someone who's a little more serious. And then you kind of are like, oh, actually I want to still laugh. So, you know, that's something that I always find myself doing, kind of like swinging back and forth on those different variables.
I think it's a sign of something good, though, and that you are learning from the relationship's failings or incompatibilities. That like it's something you can turn this sadness or sorrow into a productive. Is what were the things that didn't work for you about this person? What would you like to be different in the next person that you date? If you're stuck, a lot of people get stuck dating the same person type over and over again, and never recognizing like, oh, I keep going for people who belittle me because it's comfortable. It reminds me of how my parents treated me or something like that.
Are you talking about me?
Nope, not at all. I'm really not.
Because he could be. So I guess the danger I would want to point out is not being conscious of that process. So I think it's important, like Rob said, to be aware of and sort of do a diagnostic on your old relationship and be aware of the things that went well about it. Sometimes right after a relationship ends, it can be really hard to not only sit with the void, but to sit with the things that were good and to appreciate and have gratitude for the ways that your partner and you had a successful relationship and that your dynamic was enjoyable or meaningful. And so being mindful about those things can help you to not way overcorrect. Because I've done it to a dangerous extent where so my very first boyfriend,
Like you said, boyfriend.
What?
Boyfriend.
My very first boyfriend was not particularly sexually aggressive or assertive. So the next person I went to, who is also only the second person I ever had sex with, I went right towards because he pursued me quite aggressively. And, I don't like to think that I have a bunch of regrets about that because everything is kind of valuable information. However, when I look back on that, I don't feel like that was the best choice I could have made, especially in that dimension. Because that it's easy to see how anything can be too much, too far.
Why was it not a good choice in your mind?
I was very susceptible to being pressured into having sex and being too wide-eyed about ooh, this person's interested in me and pursuing me, and now my sort of sexual floodgates are open because I'm not a virgin anymore. So it can leave you vulnerable to being sort of taken advantage of or some sort of lower vibrational part of yourself being meeting someone else's lower vibrational self. And then I look back on that series of dates or sexual encounters with that person and I'm just like, what in the goddamn hell was I doing?
Do you wish that he had stepped in and had behaved differently and been more doubtful of your ability to evaluate the situation fairly? This is a problem that I've run into is do you just accept consent outright from somebody, or is there a line where it becomes patronizing if you're saying, I don't think you really know what you're agreeing to. You don't actually want me. You're you don't know what's good for you. I'm going to tell you that we're not going to do it because I know what's best and you're not emotionally mature enough to tell.
Well, the way you just said that was you started off not super patronizing and then you really slippery sloped.
I'm trying to give both. That
Totally.
could be overdoing it, but I'd rather err in that direction than be somebody's regret, I suppose. How do you wish that he had behaved?
I mean, listen, we were 20, 21. And so neither of us were capable of doing anything along the lines of what you're saying. Okay. And I think that, my ex before him had been so sweet and careful and conscientious that I was just like, let's date someone totally fucking reckless. And I've gone through that cycle again later in life. Which again, I think that time I did it differently, a little bit better, but I do tend to swing from sort of the good boy, the safe choice to the bad boy, the less safe choice. And I think having compassion for yourself that maybe you do want to branch out a little bit more in a different direction and you want to kind of react against or act out slightly. And that's okay. I'm merely stating with my cautionary tale, just be mindful.
When is it not okay?
What?
When is acting out destructive or too much?
Well, only you can know. I actually had a situation recently where, I don't think that I did anything wrong, but I recognized that based on the way that I'm trying to see myself and the boundaries I'm trying to develop between myself and really anyone, but primarily romantic partners, were compromised a little bit. I recognized that I knew better. And while I'm thankful that I knew better, but not every time we know better, we're actually capable of acting upon that better knowledge. But now, having had that experience and feeling in my gut and my heart really that I compromised myself a little more than I would have liked to, as long as I'm doing that consciously, I'm not as likely to repeat that behavior again. And I'll tell you the sign that I knew that I'd compromised myself was the next day I felt like garbage. And there's just, when you align with that sort of lower self-worth.
Can you describe the garbage feeling?
Oh yeah, of course. Some of it is related to having had a couple drinks, and that always makes me feel like garbage. So there's that physical,
hangover
a
feeling?
little bit of a hangover.
Okay.
So you have a little bit of a physical hangover, maybe you have a little bit of a moral hangover, and it's sort of like a grossness in your stomach, maybe a heaviness or like kind of a lump in your throat. And for me, I definitely felt like my own kind of self-worth was compromised. I didn't act in accordance with how much I aspire to value myself and what I think that my ideal partner would, regard me. I allowed myself to give something away more cheaply, not monetarily, of course, than I would have preferred. I still had fun. It was still fine. I wasn't raped. It was just, you know what? I recognize that this wasn't quite in accordance with my best values, but sometimes you have to cross that line to know where it is.
Sure.
And so don't be so terrified of erring slightly.
Do you think that there are some people who the majority of their sexual experiences are somebody's finding the line and being like, oh, okay, I don't want to do that again. Somebody's lesson of like what they're not into. What do you think that's like for them?
If someone's aware that that's the case.
Do you think most of the people who have that as a majority of their experiences don't know that people are recalibrating after having sex with them and then being like, okay, yeah, I need to start respecting myself more?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'm trying to think if I ever feel like I was that to someone. Probably. I mean, I've definitely dated or hooked up with people that, both of us were aware that they weren't their best selves, and I know that I've been there as well. I think the amount of contact afterwards is a pretty good indication.
Sure, but that could be unrelated to.
Of course, of
It
course,
could be like,
of course.
just another relationship was rekindled, or somebody came back into their life, or something else took priority that they had to deal with that.
I met a guy online back when I was living in New York a few years ago. And I was like, good Lord, this is one of the hottest guys I've ever seen in my life. And, we seemed relatively compatible, whatever. We went out, we had fun, we had drinks. I think it was that night that he came back to my place and we had sex, not good sex. And then, which no judgment on any of these things other than to say that I don't think he made a choice that was super aligned with his best self, because he then started to cry and like tell me all these really vulnerable things about how confused he was about his life and, how he's not in a good place. And, then I was kind of like comforting him, and yeah, we talked a little bit again, and then he kind of like blew me off. And so I was like, ding, 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 like this was not this person's best decision, clearly. I don't think it had anything to do with me. But I think he was trying to use sex or dating or validation from the opposite sex instead of addressing a root issue, which was that he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, and he was feeling lost and confused, and my pussy did not have the answer for that.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine, like no hard feelings, but that's a pretty damn good indication. If you have sex with someone and you have some kind of release like that, and then you are just like a pile afterwards, that's not a good indication either.
Well, I can imagine situations where a person would open up and get very vulnerable and then feel insecure about that.
Sure.
Just because they're not used to it,
Sure.
but somebody put them particularly at ease. And that could still be a good relationship. It's just something that they are like, oh, I bet I scared them off or came off as needy in that moment. And with the right person or at the right time in a person's life, it might not be a deal breaker or relationship ender. It might breed intimacy.
Totally.
Can we steer back to
Absolutely. Let's do
19
it. No,
throwaway
I
79
still have
specific
so
question?
much to say.
Okay. Let's talk about, is it disrespectful at
Yeah.
this time frame? I want to just advise against the type of thinking that is still putting your ex-partner's feelings before your own needs now that you're broken up. I think you can manage whether this is communicated to them or not. You don't need to like post publicly a picture of your first date with somebody to try, like, or
Do not
send it to
do
them.
that.
Yeah, try like it's nice to be aware of their feelings and consider them, to the point of if you're indifferent, don't like send them that information.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that if you're ready, then you're ready, and you're no longer thinking about what is good for them or not. You're thinking about what's good for you.
And I think that there should be at this phase of the breakup enough space between you where he wouldn't find out that you were doing this. Like you're not hopefully talking about every night, what are you doing? What are you up to? Da, 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 and having to lie.
If you have mutual friends,
Sure.
then I think you could, if you want to talk to one of them about the date, you can say, hey, I'm not sure that my ex-boyfriend is ready to deal with this, but can I talk to you about this guy that I met or somebody that I'm considering seeing?
Yeah. The other I mean, and you brought up something that I want to just sort of reflect the same point that I was trying to make in my last long diatribe, which is that, you know, if you go on a date, you may then find out that you weren't ready to, and that's okay. Like, you know, you may think you're ready, and one of the biggest assets in my mind of these apps is that it allows you to safely explore varying levels of contact with people. For some people, you just want to look and see what else is out there and feel like, okay, I'm taking a proactive step, or I'm seeing that there are other attractive people that have X or Y qualities, or I am talking to someone who's interested in me, and that's the step I needed at this point. And then if you go too far, you just withdraw a little bit and you go, okay, that's not quite where I'm at. I want a little less than that, or I want a little more than that.
Right.
And I think we should also address the disrespect from the point of view of her prospective dates, because that was sort of where my mind went in terms of, is it disrespectful?
Is it mean to go on a date with this person, me having just been out of a relationship, not sharing that I'm looking for another relationship? So are plenty of other people. So just communicate that.
Yeah.
You don't need to communicate that before meeting up in person if you think that limits your pool unreasonably. If you keep going out on first dates with people and finding that they're not interested because of that, then you can set that up as a filter, put that on your profile, or mention that to people in conversation before you arrange an in-person meetup.
Yeah. I was going to say to like think about the different levels where you could reveal it. Like, of course, you could state it right on your profile, which is not something that I recommend. I don't really see a lot of people doing that. But if you felt like this is what I need to communicate, and I need to communicate it now in order to feel okay about what I'm doing, then great. I'm sure someone will appreciate that honesty. You can bring it up fairly early on in the kind of back and forth you go through within the app or texting before you meet up. You know, maybe it comes up on the first date. Maybe it comes up after the first date. But like Rob's saying, like, people are on these apps for all different reasons. And some people aren't even doing what you're doing of examining if they think it's appropriate or disrespectful or anything. So like we often do on this show is like, congratulations for actually being willing to examine it, think about it, consider other people's feelings. That's a huge step in the right direction. And I think people really do appreciate honesty and consideration and the ability that you have to take their perspective, and even wonder and ask yourself, well, how would they feel about it? How would I feel about it being in that situation?
What do you think about people talking about their ex on a first date? Describing why they broke up or what their frustrations with them were, or even talking about how they miss them?
Okay, so I think it's very context dependent.
Yeah.
I am someone who pretty much is unfiltered, surprise, and so this shit often comes up. As a rule, though, I do try just for myself not to bring it up, because we all know how it sounds, how it feels when we're connecting with someone and their focus shifts to like, well, my ex did whatever. It's this immediate red flag of like, okay, this person's hung up on their ex. And that may not be bad because it may be true, and it may be a red
and
flag
you'd
that
rather
person
find that out
should be paying
earlier.
attention to.
Yeah. I think the way that they talk about it is critically important. If they start going down a road and sharing more and more details, and like it's clear that it's important for them to get these things out, then they're hung up on them. If they can succinctly like state the story without getting lost in it.
Yeah.
And
it's an indication.
Yeah, exactly.
It's neither good nor bad. It's
I think
an indication
it's
of
a
where you're
risky
at.
thing to bring up.
Yeah.
I've had experiences where it's helped me relate to a person quickly.
Yeah.
I just saw a musical comedy called Swipe Right the Musical, and the best song of it was called The Story of My Ex. It's like a Tinder date, and they both share like what they disliked about their exes.
Yeah.
And the guy's like in his musical part talking about how this is great. I'll just like validate all of her criticisms of him and agree with her that he was such a shitty guy and she deserves better, and that will lead to us having sex because we have this like false understanding or this like magnified sense of connection because we both agree what a shitty guy that guy was, and she's like interested in just seeing somebody who agrees with her on this to help her get over that guy.
Yeah. Hey, we both hate Hitler. Let's fuck.
Exactly.
The common enemy bonding strategy. I would also say that like if a great time to explore this is if someone else is going through a similar thing, and then that opens the door to you guys being on the same level about it. But when there's a disproportionate desire to talk about one's respective exes, that's a clue as to like, you know, sometimes just their openness, or sometimes it's they don't want to go there because they know what that means for you.
Yes. Most people are unlike Morgan and me in terms of how much they're willing to hear about a person's other partners at any point in their life.
Probably,
most people are just much more uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
Both of us have done work and chosen a dating style that requires some acceptance of hearing some of that information that a lot of people just want to avoid. You know, you and somebody else, no thanks, that's my worst nightmare. Like, don't bring that up at all.
Yeah. But I think I do think like on a first date, you know, it's part of the package of like both of you getting a snapshot of where are each other at right now, versus, you know, being in something that's starting to be a relationship. You're repeatedly dating someone and they keep bringing up their ex, where it becomes repetitive and sort of a fixation. That's always advisable to avoid.
If somebody can hang on a first date, I think a good question is, where did you learn what love is and how did that change over time?
Ooh.
One that I've heard, another that's kind of in the same vein is, what would you want to do differently from your parents? Because that hits like 5 different, what's their relationship to their parents? Do they want to have kids?
Yeah.
What do they change? What are their values?
I think also a sort of, not so much like a sneaky backdoor way of talking about your ex, but maybe a more productive framework is talking about what did you learn about yourself in your last relationship? Focusing on your half of it rather than, well, my ex did this and he did that and, this was bad and or good or whatever it is. It's because it's really more important about how are you using the lessons that you learned in that relationship. What are you bringing with you into the next one, and what areas are you trying to grow in? What were the gaps in communication that you didn't realize about yourself? Those are more important reflections, I think, when you're starting to be more future oriented and thinking about dating other people rather than being oriented towards this specific part of your past in this other person who isn't in your dating life going forward.
Right.
You're the person that's in your dating life going forward.
Right. And
along those lines, one of the other pieces of advice that I wanted to hit is when you're in this initial phase, or really at any phase of dating or trying to relate to other people, it's never lose as much as you can. Never lose the importance of checking in with yourself and sort of dating yourself and keeping in mind the what are your needs? What do you want out of this relationship? How is your relationship with yourself doing in the background of going on these new dates?
Yes.
Not allowing yourself to get swallowed up or your identity to get swallowed up in all of the newness and the stimulation, because I think that's where you run the risk of not leaving enough room to process the past.
Yes. I'd like to summarize the philosophy of Mark Manson's models
I would like to allow you to do that
once more.
once again.
Yeah. His theory, the thesis of that book, is that neediness is unattractive. What's attractive is true confidence that's expressed through vulnerability, and the way that you show true confidence or attain it is by caring more about what you think about yourself than what any other single individual thinks of you.
Yeah.
So that allows you to be vulnerable and share things that a person might reject about you, and being comfortable with that rejection makes you more attractive to them if they do align with what you're saying, the risky thing. So for instance, putting it out there that you just went through a breakup, for some people that would be something that they hide for a very long time, and it affects all the other ways that they communicate, that this person's coming off as if they need my approval, and that's unattractive. If we're speaking to a woman, I think that more women can get away with neediness behaviors than men, just as there are more, women are more often evaluated on their looks to the exclusion of their personality. But that's at the initial phase, and I believe that will come back to balance out eventually. So,
and I think that there's sort of the assumption of like women need to be cared for, and it's almost attractive for a man, more attractive perhaps for a man to see a woman being vulnerable because you get to employ that role of being a caretaker in a very heteronormative sense.
I'm saying vulnerability is an indication of the opposite of neediness. That this person can handle, like they're being vulnerable right now by sharing some pain, sharing some thing that they dislike about themselves or are insecure about, because they're overall secure with themselves and with the idea of you rejecting them.
Yeah.
But that's attractive in anybody.
I guess what I was saying is both vulnerability and neediness, like on the spectrum of like strong to weak, can be attractive more so to a man than a woman because of those maybe biological roles of wanting to be the protector, kind of.
Sure.
The other thing I wanted to say along the lines of the model's point is, here's a fun exercise to try if you want to like really investigate this. This is something I've started becoming aware of recently.
Okay.
And you can look at it, you can look for it in yourself, and you can look for it in other people. And you can do it in a group. And
what is it?
Bitch, I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
I'm just building up, laying the groundwork. So people who are seeking other people's approval versus within themselves just behaving the way that they think they should behave, sussing out in a group who's looking to who for approval, and who do you look to for approval? Are you just being you and not looking around at anyone to see who's looking at you, who else is doing what behavior should I model, versus just being? Who's doing that? Who's just being? And who is looking at who can reveal a really interesting underlying social hierarchy.
Yes.
And so you can then notice, are you doing it more or less than other people? And recalibrating based on, okay, you know what? I notice that, and I do this sometimes when I'm in a situation where I feel a little bit more vulnerable, feel a little more insecure about, well, how do I behave in this situation? Because maybe it's a new social context, or maybe I'm with people that I see as sort of above me or something. I will do more looking for cues versus just being who I am and not caring about what anyone else is doing, because that signals that you trust your approach.
I want to apply this specifically to the moment that a joke hits.
Yes. Looking at who laughs.
Watch where people's eyes go.
Yeah.
Who do they try to make eye contact with the second after they start to laugh or think that something's funny? Usually is an indication of who they trust shares their perspective the most. Or, if they're the one who gives the joke, they may look most at the person that they want the approval of.
Right. I was going to say, I think it's more about that.
People who I think have a more respectable to me sense of humor don't make eye contact with anyone after a joke. They don't look at the audience to see if they're getting laughs or not. They're showing their confidence by just continuing exactly what they've done, not looking to everybody. Hey, is anybody laughing? Is anybody? You see somebody look around right after they think they made a zinger. Sometimes I'll play that character and look around like, hey, isn't this funny? But that's like a joke in itself. I'm mocking people who do that.
Right. But I mean, I think it's important to say, like, for me, in certain contexts, I become the person who's looking for other people's cues. But in a situation where I'm more comfortable and more confident in, I know what the social norms are here, I can just be it and possibly model it healthfully for other people who may be looking for cues. But it's just a fascinating little area of exploration for you to do if you're looking for insight into, am I doing the right thing? Or, actually, you know what? Maybe I would be more attractive if I just looked like I knew I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That can be you can back into that fake it till you make it style. Anyway, if any of our listeners are interested in sharing their findings from this type of experiment, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, write us in at freeadvicepodcast@gmail.com.
Because I would love to hear all sorts of accounts of this.
Did you hear that?
A bird chirp?
No, it sounds like a rolling thunder in the distance. Board up the windows. It looks like we're getting it. Can you just move just a little bit away from me?
Shut the fuck up.
It looks like we're getting ready for the lightning round.
Oh my God. He didn't even ask if I had anything else to say.
Did I have to? Okay. This one comes from SMPDD. Okay, so I'm talking to a girl. Excuse me. Keyboard malfunction. The erase button on my keyboard doesn't work, so I have to just keep typing. JK, I actually fucked up in reading it. Okay, so I'm taking a girl to drive-in theater, and I don't know how we should sit comfortably. Should we sit in the bed of the truck? What would be the best / most comfortable way to watch the movie?
Oh, so you have a truck with a bed in it.
We got a truck with a bed in it.
Okay, how fucking cool would it be if you outfitted the bed with all kinds of comfy shit?
Like a cheetah print.
Like beanbag
duvet.
Chairs. Not a cheetah
chair.
print duvet.
Cheetah print duvet. Disco
Any other kind of
mirror
duvet.
on the ceiling.
There's no ceiling in the bed of the truck.
You hang a canopy with
Hay
a mirror.
bales.
The giant mirror that could crash on the two of you.
Well, I think, first of all, very smart to be going to a drive-in with your
big old truck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get that gate down. Lower the gate.
Anything where you can really spread. I think the most spreading out that can happen, everyone will be the most comfortable. And then, I mean, of course, there is the downside of it doesn't force you to be in as close of proximity if you're trying to make a move. But that will probably make her feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
If there's more open space, and then you guys can come together.
Fill it with the foam blocks that they use at those gymnastic studios when you jump into you jump into one of those pits of rectangular cubes of foam.
Sure. I think that would actually be really uncomfortable.
That would be really?
Yeah.
Would you rather do a ball pit?
I'd rather
do
a bunch of pillows and a blanket on the ground.
Children's balls you'd rather have loading up the bed of the truck?
No. Didn't say that at all.
Okay.
I think anything that you can sink into and have to keep shifting and shuffling around is not going to be good.
Sand?
No sand. Actually, I don't know. I might like sand. I like being on the beach.
Sand in trash bags.
This is getting weird and specific and makes him seem like a serial killer.
Lightning round. Next question. Dat_bog says, I need advice on making a new GT, that's gamer tag, for Xbox. Is Dat's Bog Up good? If I'm going to spend $10 on a GT, then I want it to be good. I already went to /R Gaming. They just started shitposting bad gamer tags in the comments. So, is Dat Bogs Up a good gamer tag?
Rob, I'm going to refer this one to you.
What?
I don't even know what a gamer tag is.
A gamer tag is like your online identity, your screen name.
Avatar.
No, it's your name. It's what people will have to type in to add you to their friends list.
Okay, but I don't know what
they'll call you that.
Dat Bog?
Dat Bogs Up. Yeah, Dat's Bog Up.
What's that mean?
I have no idea. I don't think it's a good name.
I think if we're both confused, although I don't know if we're the target for this.
I would go with something like Bog if you can. Or like Dark Bog.
Bogged down.
The Boggy Man. How about go with that?
Oh.
That's like a play on the Boogeyman. Got bog in it. You seem to be into the bog
Boggo
thing.
stick.
Yeah, boggo stick.
I don't understand the
bog?
origin of the name at all. No, I know what a bog is, but maybe swamp moss
This is
master.
spongy. Yeah, but bog is where
Marshman.
carnivorous plants live. This nitrogen deficient
Marshmallow man.
wet soil.
Wet soil.
Yeah. Wet soil.
We recommend wet soil.
But then people might read that as wet oil.
Let them be confused because they're going to be with the bog.
Lightning
thing.
round. Next question.
What a weird choice, Rob.
Okay.
Anyway.
I missed my friend's birthday by 3 weeks. Should I wish him a happy birthday this late? I want to, but it may seem weird. He's a good online friend of mine. I feel so bad for forgetting it.
I think that what you just communicated, you could absolutely say to him and say, you just crossed my mind and I realized it's 3 weeks after your birthday. Happy belated birthday. Was thinking of you. Some other genuine expression of what their online friendship means to you. I think it's never too late. It's, anyone's happy to have a hey, I was thinking of you, regardless of what time of year it is.
It's better to acknowledge these kinds of things.
Totally.
Even if the person didn't notice or expect or care about you giving them a happy birthday, if it's something that's bothering you, just say it. Then it's off your chest. Then they can tell you, I did feel hurt that you'd forgotten. Yeah. But thank you for it. This is the right move in any situation.
Here's what you should do. Wait 1 more week just to prove to yourself that it doesn't fucking matter. And then tell him oh my God, your birthday was 4 weeks ago. I missed it.
I disagree. Do it as soon as is convenient, as soon as you talk to them anyway, or however you normally speak. Like, just bring it up then. Get it out of the way.
I'm totally joking. Okay. The point I was merely trying to make was that, I think your friend will appreciate the gesture no matter when it is, calendar-wise. Yeah. I don't personally ascribe that much meaning to someone remembering to tell me that it was the day I was born. Mm-hmm. I'm aware.
Lightning round. Okay. King Alibaba Saluja asks.
Ooh, Saluja.
We got royalty in the house tonight.
Should we tell Dat Bog to do Saluja? Bog Saluja. Saluja Bog.
What is Saluja?
I have literally no idea. It just sounds really cool.
So King Alibaba Saluja says.
Saluja saliva.
Is relationship chemistry something that just happens, or can it be worked on? My best friend / crush pointed out that our chemistry has been off lately, but said not to worry, we just have to work on it. Is that possible? How can we work on it? We used to have a very strong chemistry, but due to fighting, we parted ways for 8 months. Ooh. We have slowly been working on our friendship, but this has me worried. Anything would be nice.
Well, my question is the crush mutual? Is the friend merely talking about the friendship chemistry? Where are we drawing the line here?
Yeah, the chemistry could be off because one of you is much more invested than the other.
Right.
Likely King Alibaba Saluja.
Back up, Saluja. One step back.
Yeah. If they're your crush and they don't see you that way, I think it's best to be explicit. Here are the terms you can say, like, is it because I'm romantically interested in you? Or like, have you noticed that I'm physically attracted to you? And how do you feel about that? Yeah. And they can tell you whether that's reciprocated or not. And that may be the source of the imbalance that could be saying that your chemistry is off. Chemistry can stand for a lot of different things. It could be that one of you smells bad to the other person. That's a chemical reason that people can use chemistry to talk about smell. It could be the pace of conversation or the types of topics or the frequency with which you contact one another. The general tone. One of you could be more sad and the other one is more happy and jovial and you're used to relating in another way. Chemistry can mean any number of these things, and I think it's best to identify what they're referencing with this. Or ask for specific moments that you thought the chemistry was off, and then you can figure out the principle from there.
Or ask when it was good, and then go from there.
Yeah, both are important.
Yeah, I think a really important ingredient of chemistry that kind of encapsulates some of what you're talking about, Rob, is like attunement. Being attuned to the other person and really looking at their verbal and nonverbal cues for when are they inviting you in more and when are they kind of pushing you away, and paying attention to and tinkering with what you put out there and how they respond, and sort of creating a mental catalog. I mean, this is stuff that people do, unconsciously without even thinking about it. But here's a way to work on the chemistry is to collect that sort of nonverbal catalog of what does this person respond with by moving towards me and giving me a little extra attention. And what do they respond with by kind of turning away?
Looking at their
or,
phones.
Yes.
Seeking somebody else, right?
Because all of those things are indications of, imagine them just holding their hand up, going like, no.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you may be coming on too strong. You may be ignoring them. We don't know where those chemistry fault lines are.
What if we gave each other that kind of exaggerated feedback as we were talking? Of like,
Yeah. Well, actually, because while
Giant
we're
thumbs up,
recording,
yeah.
I've kind of thought about doing that a little bit more.
yeah. Let's try.
Well,
It's
yeah.
a little experiment for you and me.
Yeah. Well, because there was a moment earlier where I noticed you were talking very fast, and I was kind of trying to like slow myself down. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to put up a big hand and shake my
your
head
head,
because
no.
I didn't want you to think I was rejecting what you were saying.
I think I can handle that.
Yeah. Okay. So we could have our own little sign language system of like,
Or if you just did like a slow-mo,
like,
act like you've gone into bullet time in the Matrix,
Yeah.
and you're dodging the bullets.
yeah,
the
or
way
like
that-
finger
Neo did.
swirling, wrap it up, the opposite of that.
Sure, yeah, roll your eyes and
Oh my God.
do a
Suck a dick.
jerk off thing. Yeah.
Yeah. All of
I
these
don't think-
nonverbal
I
cues
don't
are
think
valid.
you would take as kindly to that if I were to
In the
do that.
middle of my speech,
Yeah, I
if
think
you
it
were
would
just
throw
like
you off more than
really
me.
enthusiastically sucking an air dick, that would be
Yes.
funny.
Okay.
I mean, you would have to tell me ahead of time what that would be attempting to communicate.
Like, shut up. Talk about something new, please, for the love of God. Then you do that.
Okay. Or maybe it's when I'm being like overly, what's the word I'm looking for? Pandering.
Pandering,
Just
okay,
sucking a
yeah.
huge dick.
Yeah.
Like, come on, stop
Okay.
pandering.
We'll work on our code, our symbols for the next episode. Final lightning round question. Cheetah dust.
Ooh, I love
there's a gamer
that.
tag worth spending $10 for if it's not taken on Xbox Live. Dat bogs up. All right, Cheetah Dust asks, how do I do more besides sleeping and browsing Reddit all day? People say get a hobby, but I don't know which to take up. I'm such a loser. Please recommend some things for me to do. I'm not very fit or athletic.
Okay. This is kind of a funny meta thing because the question's coming from Reddit. So he's like, Reddit, tell me how to be off of Reddit.
Sure.
Turn this podcast off, first of all.
First of all, congrats for asking and
Yes,
seeking help.
100%.
Recognizing the problem is often the hardest step. We're actually starting to do an activity is also very hard sometimes. I've been stuck on Reddit, feeling like I sleep and do Reddit all day for various periods of my life,
Yeah.
and I can relate to that. If it's hard to pick a thing, start by making a list of things that you don't like, and then look at what don't you like about doing them. So if it's athletic or fit things, you don't like breaking a sweat, you don't like being outside, heavy breathing, any of those things, okay, then push yourself in the direction of things that avoid those. I personally recommend exercise as a great mental health tool. If you don't like doing it, just doing the smallest amount of movement that is a challenge to you is great. I think that people apply for these one-size-fits-all fitness programs, and that doesn't work. If it's an inappropriate challenge, it's not going to work well. It's like enrolling a first grader in a college class and being like, why aren't you enjoying hearing this comparative literature stuff? And it's like, they need to do see spots run, and that'll be an appropriate challenge level for them. That'll be satisfying for them to be able to write basic sentences. Same thing happens with fitness. There are many levels to this. And so if you're at a basic level, finding like a slightly uncomfortable challenge for you will make you feel good. But it doesn't need to be fitness at all.
Right.
Just doing something, picking something, and then collecting your observations. You'll meet somebody if it's a social hobby.
It's I wanted to go in a similar direction. I think that like the two things that you've identified that you want to move away from or devote less time to are sleep and Reddit. And so where do those things occur? Maybe in your bedroom.
Yeah. probably in
So
the bed.
okay, so let's do something that's the opposite of that.
Get away
and
from
just
there.
Getting out of that room.
Yeah.
What is appealing about being in a different space? Where can we find some reference to what you enjoy and is slightly comfortable about sleeping or being on Reddit that can be found slightly and then departed from or expanded on being in a different environment.
Yeah.
And, you know, the reason that I want to bring up the fitness thing is because it's interesting that you bring this up. And I don't think that you're bringing it up because you're bringing it up as a parameter of like, this is not, I can't do anything in this category. I think that perhaps it's something that you're self-conscious about.
You're talking about the question asker?
I'm talking about the question
Cheetah dust.
asker,
Okay.
cheetah dust. And so to me, it sounds like this is something that maybe you wish you had a more of a proclivity toward. So like Rob said, start super, super small and be super excited and celebratory with yourself and proud of yourself for taking one step in that direction. And in this case, it can just be taking one step, leaving that room, walking outside of your place of residence, just maybe even just sitting outside, like on a balcony or a patio, or, you know, something that just makes your world a little bit bigger than those things and reconnects you to experiencing the world from a bodily sensory perspective. Because I think sleeping and Reddit are both, you know, ways of kind of shutting off those more kinetic, more tactile experiences. So maybe even instead of starting out with like, go for a jog, have a different outdoor sensory experience. Like, look at a tree. Like, literally start by just looking at a tree. Watch the way the tree moves. Observe something about the tree. What do the leaves look like? What do the branches look like? What does the air feel like on your face?
I think that drawing is a great way of observing and forcing you to see the lines of something rather than what you expect it to be.
And moving from a place of just describing it verbally to expressing it more flexibly. Drawing is a great way to get a little bit creative with it, but it can be a really intimidating practice. So if that's the case, start by going, I'm going to do the worst drawing of this tree I can possibly do, and make it a game with yourself. Like, how can I make this the furthest from what this tree really looks like, just to get pencil on paper. And that's something that can be applied to like basically any activity. It's like, do the absolute level 0 or level 1 version of that activity.
And you will find a way to take joy in comparing yourself to who you were yesterday instead of
only
to who
compare
somebody
yourself
else
to you
is today.
Yeah.
So you give yourself permission to suck and to be uncomfortable and to be bored the first time that you do any new activity. Most things have some kind of a barrier to entry, and then they start getting more fun as you see yourself progressing, and you take more and more joy in it as you gain proficiency. But there is some initial startup cost. And that cost can seem overwhelmingly high and keep you sleeping in on Reddit all the time. So the best thing to do, I think, is to break it down into the smallest possible first step and just commit to doing that. If it's drawing something, it's just getting out a piece of paper and doing a single line of the drawing of the tree. And then as soon as that line is done, you have permission to put it away.
Yep. I totally agree. And I think risk-taking in general goes along those same lines of like, take small risks, and then down the road you will get more comfortable with taking larger and larger risks. But don't beat yourself up by, you know, for not taking the biggest risk that you can.
Right.
You have to celebrate the little things that you do, because if you take a big, what is a big risk at a certain point when you're never going out of your comfort zone, to go out of your comfort zone a little, and then you kind of devalue yourself for like, oh, I was only able to do this, that, and the other, and it wasn't that good, and I should have even tried. You're not very likely to make that attempt again. So I think that, you know, some language that you can use around that, what I do to myself is be like, fuck yeah, I cleaned the kitchen. That's fucking awesome. And like, I think about like, hell yeah, like I did it. And you know what? It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And now I'm this person that like knows that when I want to clean the kitchen, it's a manageable task, or literally can be applied to anything, but sort of basically psyching your brain up to think like, yeah, this is going to be super fun. And while you're doing it, like, oh, this is fun. I feel the water on my hands. Maybe I kind of like sing or dance while I'm doing this chore. And then after you do it, you look at the kitchen being clean and you go, oh my God, this feels so good. I feel like I have space in here. I feel like there's room to cook. And that will help you overcome too the kind of physical dependency that can happen when you're doing an activity like being on the internet over and over again, where you get into a groove with that. And that feels like then the easiest path to take over and over.
Yes.
And your brain will miss the stimulation that comes from that type of thing, for sure.
Yeah.
To be prepared for that going in.
trying to always avoid discomfort ensures that you'll feel it constantly. Right? If you're always trying to avoid it in the moment, then it will always be there.
Yeah.
And so take the thing that's currently pleasurable for you and set that as a reward. Use the Premack principle of pairing a behavior you'd like to start doing with one that you already enjoy. So once I draw that tree, I can get on my favorite subreddit and check it for 10 minutes, whatever it is you like to do now.
Yeah, I love that.
The thing is also you'll find that you enjoy browsing Reddit more once you feel like you've done something that has earned it. It's
And
better
once
to
you're
eat
having-
dessert later in the meal or unwind with friends at the end of a day rather than the beginning of a day.
Yes, and also you will get more out of it because it will be more novel. It'll be like, oh, I am enjoying the experience of being on Reddit a little bit because I haven't spent my entire rest of the day on Reddit. I'm not just in this autopilot sinkhole. I'm choosing consciously the activities that I'm doing, and there's variety there, and there's stimulating different parts of my brain and body.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a heavy storm. Really came down there for a minute, didn't it?
There was flashing everywhere. I had to go inside.
Yeah, that was a good lightning round, though, I'll say. All right. Do you have any more announcements or things that you want to get into this episode?
Here's what I want to say.
Okay.
We really got quick about leaving the original question behind.
Okay.
And
Sorry.
no, I mean, look, it's okay. I did have more possibly to say on it. But to me, it's less about, did we cover all of our bases with it, and more about like, I'm always curious in hearing like, what was your motivation to hop away from it so quickly?
I think we'd talked about it for long enough.
Isn't that a decision that we make collaboratively?
We could do it that way. I've been taking it as the question asker's duty. So it's like you'd have a week that you're in charge of pacing, and I'd have a week that I'm in charge of pacing.
But I see.
I'm happy to negotiate more every week, and then we just treat it as equal responsibilities.
Because let me tell you what it felt like for me. We're modeling our nonviolent communication.
Mm-hmm.
It felt to me like, a disregard for what my opinion would have been on that. Because normally we do ask each other.
What your opinion would have been on whether there was more to include. Okay.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm more focused on parsing now than like, let's go back to the question and cover like 2 or 3 imaginary hypothetical points that I may have made.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I suppose I was acting from a place of confidence that I knew what was best for the audience and that they were ready for new information.
Yeah.
If you think that decreases the quality of your performance or the quality of our product, then I'm down to not take that leadership executive decision type of action.
The reason that I want to question it is because this is not an isolated incident. I think that we both have different attention spans for things, and I've noticed you've told me in other areas of your life that you often lean towards novelty quite quickly and get bored with staying in the same subject for longer periods of time.
Sure.
And so part of it also is my desire to question that impulse, that perhaps your novelty meter is like, has a lower threshold or a higher threshold. I don't know what I'm saying, but than the average person. And I always feel maybe perhaps not to put a judgment on it, but more or less, I always try to think about, are we doing the best job that we can to comprehensively address all of the points that the question could directions the question could potentially take us, and topics that are related.
I think that I place a higher value on the interest of the listeners who are not asking the question, as there are more of them. And I would listen to a podcast like this, mostly hearing questions that did not directly apply to me, but I like the analysis, banter, personality of the host, so I'd continue listening. And I think for that, brevity should be encouraged, and like saying the most important points as succinctly as possible is the direction that I'd like us to move in.
I think I'm also having a feeling response to the abruptness with which you unplugged the topic, because I have a history of being the attention being paid to me suddenly being removed. And so I think it, to me, evokes that kind of similar response of like, oh, suddenly I'm just not interesting to you. So I guess I'm thinking about it from both. I'm reacting to it. My response is related to both of those things, of my emotional response to that type of interaction. And then also, like, I think maybe we do need a more collaborative, balanced decision on, do we think we've really exhausted this topic appropriately? Okay. But I understand where you're coming from in terms of like trying to read the biggest portion of the audience. But right. I guess my question is, do we think that the judgment that you made is calibrated more toward your interest than theirs?
I think it's safe to assume that most every audience member is less interested, has a shorter attention span than I do.
Even shorter?
Yes. I know you, I know me. All of this is interesting by virtue of the fact of being in the room together. Yeah. Everybody who's listening to this has a different context and probably less of a connection to each of us than we have to each other.
For sure.
So I'm going by like I don't know if this is an adage or an entertainment industry wisdom of like you have a music, same deal. Like you have a very short period of time to capture people's attention.
So then why is our podcast over an hour?
Well, this is it's just in line with that philosophy of like keep things moving, try to keep things. Here I'm repeating the brevity line, so I'm going to cut that and not be redundant. Are you open to a suggestion of a solution from me for the abrupt part of it, the feeling like it was unplugged your attention immediately?
Am I open to?
Yeah, would you like to hear a potential solution?
Sure, of course.
I could preemptively, or before I'm feeling like it's time to move on, give more of like slight yawn type building up, whatever we decide is the code for that that's inoffensive, of like, all right, let's move on to the next topic in 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think that we could do it even verbally and say, I just want to get one final thought in here or let's make 2 or 3 more points and then move forward. Gotcha. A sort of 2/3 of the way in kind of temperature take.
Yes.
For, have you said all the things that you want to say? If you haven't, this is the time to make sure all of the most salient points have been made. Rather, because I think that we should be conscious of the arc of how we're answering these questions rather than being like, here's a random solution, here's a random solution, here's a random solution, and next. Because I like to do the little bit of summary of like, okay, here's basically what we're saying.
Sure.
And,
I think that's valuable. I'd like to get that summary back in there before moving on to the next topic.
And I think that you present valuable points as well. And I tend to get lost in what I'm saying and feel more connected to like, oh my God, we really got to make sure this person, we've covered all of our bases and there's absolutely no stone left unturned. Right. Yeah.
I think.
Thanks for going through that with me.
Yeah, of course. I'd like to look back at the episodes where I've done that. If it is an imbalance of who's spending time speaking that causes me, if you're talking more than I am, does that cause me to move on to the next subject quicker? Or is it related? Maybe not causal, but that's something that I think from the beginning, our better episodes are the ones where we have an even balance. Yeah. And then if it shifts one way, it's usually you talking more than me. Mm-hmm.
And louder. And needing to move my microphone back.
Yeah, that's, I think, an independent issue. But
related.
I just have more years of experience with microphone technique is what I chalk that up to. And a less expressive laugh and just a more monotone voice, less dynamics. It's interesting. It's a good vocal technique to have that dynamism in your voice. But
Thanks for phrasing it that way.
It is. No, I mean, it's Neil deGrasse Tyson is the king of this. He'll draw you in with something very small, and then he'll make it huge.
Wow. Yeah, that was you. Yeah. I'm even like, whoa.
Yeah, he's great at it.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
Okay.
I'd like to do that more.
Yeah, I really want to think about more of like the music, the overall musicality and like the symphony that is this podcast versus like, here's a song that just goes like this, na 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 na,
right?
And being like, na da 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 da, plink plink, plink plink.
I've tried to read the questions more expressively.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that
get
a lot.
into like the person's head state, and sometimes I'm going a little bit mockingly, like making them a bit cartoonish.
We like it.
I
think
mind.
we all like being a little bit rubbing elbows.
Yeah, they know I'm teasing them lovingly if they're longtime listeners, which they all are. They know that I care about them, and I'm just like picking on typos or awkward wording.
Yeah, because they're one of the gang.
Yeah.
We're all friends.
Yeah, we are.
Cool. And I love doing this, as you know, the here and now analysis of like, how are we doing? Is this going well? Because I think that it's important to model that like checking in with yourself, which we talk about all the time. Like check in with yourself, talk about your boundaries, talk about how you feel, have those discussions. Because that's what leads to everybody getting their needs met, to some extent. There's always some compromise. And everyone feeling like on the same page and connected. And that's the foundation of what makes Rob and my friendship so fucking awesome.
Yeah. Trust is a function of your ability to receive and give negative feedback to that person and know that they'll accept it and that it won't ruin
you.
Yeah, that it's not going to destroy everything because one of you had a criticism of the other. If you don't have that, then you have a person that you think is very nice and they think you're very nice and you're both worried that neither of you is being honest, because anytime you're close enough with a person for a long time, there's going to be some dispute, disagreement, or criticism that one of you has the other. And I think that, intimacy builds from like the ability to express that in as least, as little aggressive way as possible. In a way of like,
in a way that considers their feelings.
Yeah. That's something that I could work more on, I believe.
Me too.
How to consider feelings when delivering criticism. But I know you have to overshoot it sometimes in practicing it for the first time. Like, I used to just not criticize, avoid all conflict.
Totally.
And so in taking my baby steps, there are going to be times that I offend people, and I will try to apologize to them and also forgive myself for doing that and not just revert back to always apologizing and avoiding conflict.
And also, sometimes you don't realize how your communication with someone may have come across until later, once you've reflected on it. And so like the birthday question, it's like, that's great that occurred to you and you want to express that their friendship is meaningful to you and that you accidentally missed their birthday, because that's what you want on your birthday anyway, just to know people are thinking about you. And who doesn't want that any of the 365 days of the year? Just be you, take the time you need to reflect on like how you want to be. And it's never too late to take a step towards being the self that you want to be, even when you think you've missed the boat on it. Because you haven't. If you're still breathing, you have not missed the boat. God, I love this.
Yeah, me too. What would you rate today's episode?
I don't know. Maybe a 7.
I was going to say 7, and I think we just kicked it up to an 8. With this last little bit.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'd give it a B.
Yeah, solid work. Solid effort, guys.
Nice.
If you want us to meander on your question, your call for advice,
do
give
a
us
live
a shout.
podcast at your birthday party.
Yeah, 3 weeks later.
Middle-aged women are doing it across the country. We have bookings. You come in for an hour. You invite the whole book club over. You drink some wine. You everybody writes down questions anonymously.
Yeah.
We answer them in your living room. It's a hoot.
Yeah.
It's only a $200 per person appearance fee.
And here's what you can do, unrelated to that. If you're in a conversation with a friend of yours and they ask you for advice and use a lot of specific details, write that shit down, send it to us, act like it's your question, and just get involed, because we want to hear from you. What do you think about the podcast?
And then don't even tell them about the podcast. Just regurgitate what we said back to them.
Yeah.
Witty banter and all, and they're going to be like, whoa.
Good night.